to another episode of the Outer Rim Ramblin' with myself, Adam Neeson, joined as always by my Jedi Knight partner, Danny Bryan. How are you, my friend?
I am all good. Before hitting the record button, we've already had a fairly decent ramble. And it's
Mm.
not even it's not even just us this time. Like we're not the reason for all the ramble today.
Mhm.
Yeah, we've covered culinary topips, we've covered fashion.
Two fancy men with their fancy meals, and here's me eating pizza bagels for dinner. It's just delicious,
Hmm.
you know? But joining us today is a man of many talents, a man you will recognize as Vane from Mandalorian and Skeleton Crew, but also stars in the other franchise with the stars, Star Trek, as well as a multitude of horror projects, including the television show Evil, Smile, Teen Wolf, American Horror Story, and the Foo Fighters movie Studio 66. Today we have Marti Matulis. How are you, sir?
I'm well, gents. Thanks for having me in. Danny, Adam, it's good to see you guys.
Good
Good
to
to see
see
you
you
too.
too.
And the time difference allows me second coffee, probably moving on to third coffee before the.
You-
We're cheersing.
I have a Dr. Pepper. So, Mari, thank you so much for joining us. We're here mostly to talk about your Star Wars career, but we'll get stuck into a few other bits because Adam and I are also two big horror fans. We also
Right.
do a horror podcast called The Dissection for the Fright Club NI, and Adam also writes for the Fright Club NI's website. So, we'll talk a little bit about your horror career too. But
Yeah.
in terms of Star Wars, prior to getting to be in a galaxy far, far away, what is your Star Wars origin story? Were you a Star Wars fan before you were a part of it?
Back in the olden days, a little 7-year-old Marty was leaning forward onto the seats in front of him with his eyes wide and his mouth hanging open, watching the Star Destroyer fly over his head. So I was one of those kids where it hit at the right time. And from that day on, you didn't just go hang out with your friends. You went to go play Star Wars. You'd grab your guys and grab your ships and throw them on your bike and head over to your friends for the day of just like diving into that world. That was probably second grade. Yeah, I remember getting a Hammerhead action figure taken away from me because I had him in my pocket in school, and you can only play with your figure so long before the teacher is wise to your ways and steals your toys.
They were just missing that one from their collection, you see. So they took it for themselves. And what was so apart from Hammerhead, what other Star Wars? And I'm assuming these are all the proper Kenner jobs. Do you have any of them left?
I don't have any of them left. I of course now wish I did, but at some point I had that notion of like, why am I doing this? I'm not going to collect. They're aging. There's someone else who might get more value from them. So I think I let them go at some point. But I didn't have that many. So I had the 2-pack flat case, the vinyl snap case with the tray. And I remember that they were all full. And I did get to the point where I was doubling up a few. And to this day, because I had them all sectioned and not just dumped, I kept the right gun with the right figure, and I can still remember the shape of the gun that goes with the right figure. Boba Fett was far and away my favorite one, and I think I went through 2 or 3 of those because some of them had to have authentic battle damage that some of them couldn't recover from. Loved my Darth Vader, loved my Hoth Han Solo, and IG-88 was great. And then the bounty hunters were always kind of the favored characters for me.
Yeah. Was there any figure you didn't get that you wish you had?
I mean, probably all of them, everyone that I didn't have. I
Yeah.
did like them. I think that I had a friend who lived in the town that I lived in. He had probably everything, but I didn't see the same level of care. And I'm wondering if that is because he got everything he wanted and then just threw them all in a box, and he didn't have the same kind of like nostalgia value building as he played with them and then put them carefully back and put their gun in their hand and then said goodnight to them.
Yeah.
But no, I think, and looking back on them now, I mean, what did they do? They did that. They didn't really do much, but they were magical at the time. So I'm a big fan of, the development of them, and the Black series now kind of capture my imagination. I love, as I got older, taste got a little more refined, got a little more exposure to the world. Anything coming out of Japan that was made out of metal and had more than 15 joints, I was like, that's where toys should be. So yeah, the more detailed the sculpts, the more joints. That's kind of where my mindset, even as a 55-year-old kid, that's what I find appealing now.
Do you have your fingers crossed for a Vane Black Series figure?
They've been crossed, they've been uncrossed, they've been every format I can think of, because I don't know, I haven't talked to anybody from Hasbro, but I have it on good word that some of us pirates were in the next round. And I know that I was scanned when I went in for the job. So I know that they have all the data. Did make the Lego. I got the minifig, got the spaceship. I I heard rumblings of a Funko Pop, and I heard that we were in the next round to be released for Black Series. So, if by some stroke of luck there's a resurgence in popularity of Skeleton Crew, viewership goes up again, they might pop out that next section of Pirate Black Series.
I really hope so because I need someone for my Smee to fight. So I
Yeah,
really hope that
Brutus
is the case.
only got it for so long.
So did you go then from, you young fan, loving the original trilogy, did you then partake of the prequels and the sequels? Have you been sort of trucking along with Star Wars up until the point that you got involved?
Yeah, I kept up with the films pretty religiously. When the prequel trailer came out, I was so excited that you recall that kind of sparse trailer that showed like the image of the ship and like the Gungans with the thing walking through the mist, and it was magical. I think I was of an age where I sat there in the audience going, this isn't for me necessarily, but I'm enjoying it. So, there was the slightly aged out fan who still enjoyed it. Yeah, I've never lost my enthusiasm for the projects. It took me a little while to get into Clone Wars and Rebels. I thought there's so many of them. They had already been out for a number of years, and I didn't catch them at the time because I didn't have the whatever cable channel or streaming service they were on. But a friend of mine, Daniel, he kept at it. He kept saying, it gets really good. I'm like, I'm sure it does, but busy. And every once in a while he'd be like, so did you start yet? I can't do it. So at some point I got onto YouTube and researched a little bit of like kind of the core episodes so I didn't miss anything. Some of those filler episodes I'd give a few minutes and check to make sure that I wasn't missing anything, and I might skip through or speed through some of them. Boy, am I glad I did. I think the end of Clone Wars and the last bit of Rebels is some of the best storytelling they've ever done.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite arc in Clone Wars?
Favorite? Oh man,
putting you on the spot.
I mean, I think the genius of what he did with the Ahsoka character, just as kind of a surrogate for us, and also having that emotional core for Anakin. I think it was toward the end when she kind of took agency and made the decision for herself to leave. Mm-hmm. And that scene when she and Anakin are speaking, and it's like, I'm gonna get a little choked up just thinking about it. When she addressed him more as an equal and less as a young Padawan child, like she'd finally grown out of that like pissy teenage era and like took agency for herself and realized like, no, this is not for me. I'm gonna chart my own path. Everything around that was like icing. I thought that was really the core of it all. And then her and Maul, later, I need to rewatch.
Yeah, and it's always worth going back to.
And I know Lauren from doing some conventions. So now that I know she did the body motion capture for that fight scene with Maul toward the end, I'm like, now I need to watch it again. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. That was some wonderful, wonderful storytelling. I want to know the same. Bring those questions around and answer them for me. I'd like to know what your favorites are.
Oh, mine is in the arc with Fives, finding out about the inhibitor chips. That for me is just like everything that encapsulates what's good about the clones. We've kind of got this build up of character. We've got to know Fives and how he's interact with all his brothers, and then to have this conspiracy land on him and him feel solely responsible and it culminating the way it does, it just gets me every time.
Nice.
I like the sort of introduction of the Bad Batch because I'm not a big clone guy, but seeing D. Bradley Baker like create these very unique sort of Dirty Dozen type guys that all had their own individual personality. To me, I was like, oh, I could have more of that. And thankfully, we did get more of that.
Yeah, lovely series.
Yeah, such like for something that could easily be just kid friendly. It's something that starts very dark and goes darker somehow.
Yeah, I love how much care they put into that struggle that they're having, both with identity, with purpose, with loyalty, with what loyalty, making these choices that I think are foundational, and they're great for kids, even if a kid's not ready for it. I think it seeps in, and the stuff that I grew up with, looking back on it, I'm like, I didn't understand half of that, but with that depth and that complexity, it's a good foundational thing for kids to get on board with. And I like think even, we can bridge into Skeleton Crew. I think the guys did a great job making it an ostensibly kids show. But I mean, I was a kid from the 70s, grew up with Looney Tunes, and they were not intended for kids per se. They were made by crazy adults to entertain adults ahead of cinema. They were pre-cinema entertainment. And there's a lot of not necessarily kid-friendly content, but it refined a sense of humor that I don't think I would have even half of if I hadn't been exposed to that on the regular as a steady diet of the early stuff, the 50s and 60s.
Wile E. Coyote told me to never give up. So it's an important important lesson.
Never, maybe plan carefully, but never give up.
Yeah, and never put any money into the Acme company. They're scoundrels.
Use it, discard it. Won't work.
The fun thing about if you are going to do a rewatch of the Clone Wars, if there's probably episodes you haven't seen that are arcs of like R2-D2 and C-3PO and Jar Jar Binks, and those are like nice little palate cleansers in between all of the heavy stuff.
Fair. Yeah. I did push pretty hard and rammed the core episodes into my brain. So yeah, some of the lighter fare could be a good chapter breaks.
Now's a good time, that festive time of year is always a good time to sit down and go through it all. So where do you go? So you've been sort of tagging in Star Wars content, and then one day you get a call, you get to be a part of Star Wars content. How'd that come about for you?
I've tried to reverse engineer that a lot, and it was one of the few times ever in my 20 plus year career as a professional actor in this kind of creature suit niche that I fell into. But also as a kid, like I was in theater from grade school on, and I always wanted to figure out this thing. So I was always studying acting. I was always studying movies. I didn't just watch them. I like picked them apart, and I sat there trying to like, okay, he did that, but then they went to this. Like, why I was figuring out editing, like, steeping myself in cinema. So along the way, this audition came up, and it just happened that my agent oversaw a lot of physical performance, creature suit people, like stunt people. And it also then happened that Lucasfilm was aware of that. She had provided them a lot of people for the early seasons of Mandalorian. Like I think Tate came to them via her. She knew that I had an actor's background, not a stunt background. So I had the ability to walk, talk, and chew gum. And yeah, and it happened. The audition came in like a standard audition. I sifted through the codes and discerned that it must be a Star Wars thing because it just kind of felt like it. They strip out all the identifying properties so you don't immediately get online and go, "Hi, Star Wars, everybody." Yeah, and I did the self-tape in my basement. Felt confident enough to put on some laser blast sound effects at the end of the audition when the gun was drawn. It was the shootout scene from that first Mandalorian episode with Grief. And then, yeah, I got the confirmation that I'd booked it off of that. And then the ball was rolling. And the other thing that happened to align is because I have done so much of this, there are copies of my head and hands and teeth, like at all these shops around town. So my hopefulness was that they would do this as a makeup and not just a rubber mask. And that bore out. They were working on that when I connected with the makeup team. So all these things just kept like lining up to let Vane be a really great, expressive character that they decided, or at least informed me on the day that they were not going to kill. He was originally going to die in that first shootout. So as far as I know, he's still out there somewhere. I didn't see a corpse at the end of Skeleton Crew.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of Vane being a Nikto, was he intended to be a Nikto from day dot in the script, or was there did they play about with a few different species, or how did that sort of work out in terms of how he becomes part of the lore of Star Wars, part of the canon?
Yeah. By the time it came to me, I think the makeup artists were already working on it. So they had been committed to this species, this race. It was never presented as anything other than a brown Nikto space pirates, British. And clearly from the script, a bit of a drinking problem, perhaps, or at the very least, emotionally reactive, emotionally dysregulated child that he is. And for the character itself, that was kind of the clue in was he is kind of that like a petulant child inside. He's got aspirations of greatness that his ability to manage his emotions probably would never allow him to achieve. He's a bit of a flailer. Just good enough, though. He's a great pilot.
Yeah.
he can hold his own.
And in terms of, even as you say, it's the proper prosthetics rather than the rubber mask, because the Niktos we'd seen before in like Return of the Jedi are all just the kind of like rubbery solid heads. How
Yeah.
did it feel getting to be this species that we'd always seen as just like background, like goons and guards and that sort of thing, and bringing a lot of a life to this species that otherwise is just a background player?
I was really excited about it. I was aware that most of what they'd done, even in Mandalorian, because of time and budget and whatnot, most of the aliens were in fact pullover masks with varying degrees of flexibility and ability to emote. I know the makeup artists were excited about it because they'd been wanting to do a prosthetic makeup, not a mask. And I think this was one of if not maybe the first appliance-based aliens in the shows, in the Mandalorian shows. So I was excited because that's been my wheelhouse. My job for 20 plus years has been to sit in front of a mirror and go, okay, what can I do? What can I not do? Do I have a mouth? Do I have eyes? Like what do I get to work with? So I was very quick to kind of assess the makeup. They told me what the sculptor had done to build in a little bit more flexibility, because obviously they had to build out a lot to cover my schnoz and then build out the mouth. And I saw what I had to work with, and I worked it. They did a makeup test that turned out to be, I would liken it to the character's audition. Typically, a makeup test is more for the department heads to kind of look at and go, okay, we need to adjust this, we need to modify that. This was more like, we're investing a lot into this thing, so we want to see now what it can or can't do. So when the phones started coming out and someone told me that Mr. Favreau would be on and Rick was going to be on, and it was quite the dog and pony. So I cranked it up as hard as I could. I was working. I hope I didn't say anything appropriate to anyone high up, but apparently it went okay, because then they saw what it could do. And I think that's probably when the wheels started turning in their minds to see whether or not they could find a way to keep him around and not kill him off, because why would you really?
Mm-hmm. And did you kind of have an idea after you weren't killed off a Mandalorian, and they, were this was at that time sort of said like, oh, we'd like to bring this character back at some point, be ready? Or was it kind of Mandalorian was done and then a while later, they were like, we want you back for Skeleton Crew? How did it feel getting that kind of transition from being in the Mandalorian to going to Skeleton Crew, which are quite, yes, set in the same universe, but different vibes?
Yeah, it initially, when they said they weren't going to kill him off, there was a little bit of hopeful talk of like, well, let's see if or how we might be able to work him in, but he's available, right? He exists now. He's not dead. So there were a couple of emails back and forth, and then what seemed to be a bit more of a final email in my mind of like, well, they structure everything out before they ever start shooting, so the seasons are pretty tight, and they couldn't find a way to fit him in. So they gave me the very hopeful, but he's not dead. He's on ice. So I thought, well, being on Star Wars ice is better than being gone. And then I think it was pretty short time afterwards, maybe just a few weeks, when there was another email saying, hey, by the way, there's a new show. And my little actor brain started like pinging and lighting up. I'm like, oh my God, really? A new show? And they mentioned that there was going to be a pirate component. But then, of course, because everything's so top secret, they told me nothing else. So my fan actor brain immediately started Googling his fingers to a nub to see what else might be out there, what's coming up. And I knew that they were making Ahsoka. That I knew. So I thought, well, okay, if Ahsoka, then how pirates? What would that look like? How would we be, So my brain was completely focused on that. And then at some point I found out that a makeup artist I've worked with a few times on American Horror Story, doing Piggy Man, Mike McCash, he helped with that amazing Stranger Things 5 Vecna makeup. He's an amazing artist. He and his wife are both phenomenal. I found out he was going to be working on this next show. So I started speaking as if like, oh, so Ahsoka, yeah. And he's like, no, I don't know about that. I'm like, wait a minute, am I involved? What's happening here? So slowly, piece by piece, I started finding out that it was not that, it was this, but we don't know what this is, because again, details are pretty slow and minimal. They don't really tell you a lot. They might tell you just what you need right before you do something, because we don't want to risk any kind of spoilers. I get it. As an actor, I want to know, well, I should say as a technically minded actor, I want to know everything. I want to know beginning to end, who's involved, what the relationships are, because then I can go back and take all those pieces and start working. But I'm not going to complain. It was quite a gift to be invited into that next show, which turned out to be just, I love Skeleton Crew. Not even because of the involvement, like the experience was great, but I love that show. It's really pretty
So good.
art. It moves. Each episode feels really tight. I love it.
Yeah. Whenever we started this podcast, Skeleton Crew is kind of one of the earliest things we covered. And I think we just spent the whole time talking about how much we love it. I love that it's like Goonies meets Treasure Planet meets, it's so good. And just the whole feel of it, it's very Amblin, it's very
Mhm.
autumnal feeling. And to build on that, where Mandalorian kind of gave us a scenario with pirates, this is fleshing out pirates within the Star Wars universe. And yeah, to have your character kind of come back, we get to see him again in in a outpost that is specifically for the outlaws and the pirates of the Star Wars galaxy. It was incredible. It was so cool. And to have all those wee like characters and Easter eggs and wee niche things like hidden throughout there it was great to watch. And just the whole thing was incredible. But getting to kind of build on the pirate lore of Star Wars, going into it, was there much kind of talk about like what it means to be a pirate within the Star Wars universe?
Marty, show up here Monday at 6 a.m.
And that was it.
Yeah.
Because I imagine with everything else in Star Wars, they're always like, okay, so here's the backstory and here's this part of the universe, and always seems so fleshed out. Was there not like a pirate code book or something that was like handed to you to be like, this is the pirate code of the Star
No,
Wars universe?
I think I could have developed it, printed it, and handed it out, and that would have been fine until they told me to stop. No, I think just because of the demands of the scheduling and the secrecy and everything changing from day to day, and the revolving cast list per day. At some point, I can't remember which episode, but when a group of the pirates were going to go explore the Onyx Cinder, at some point, I was like, well, shouldn't Vane be there? Like, isn't he the one who's like crazy for spaceships and a pilot? And it doesn't matter. Like they've got their own way of working, and the decisions are way outside my visibility. So no, I think that because I'd established him in those two episodes, I think they kind of figured I was good to go. I don't know that anyone else got any more than that, other than sitting with the makeup artist and kind of looking at the design. Because I think you typically do get to see concept designs of your character. You are involved a few times in costume tests or makeup tests. You'll come in kind of in process, but it's largely, or at least in my case, it was largely left up to my own imagination to come up with the voice, come up with the physicality in my own mind. The minimal backstory. I didn't really try to delve into his childhood to see what his core wounds were, but as I said, I think it reads. He's a he's a child. But on Skeleton Crew, I get to really cement that because we did have the kids. I think I had a sense of it on Mandalorian, kind of the direction Vane was going, but it really crystallized. And of course, I hope that they bring him back personally, but to then further explore this aspect of him, it was with all the kids. They were phenomenal, but with Ryan in particular, some of the things we were doing kind of off camera, I'd just look around, and a couple times I'd see her looking over at us, and I'd like stare at her, and she'd give me the old like, got your nose, and just messing with each other like kids. I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly how Vane needs to act with her and with all the kids. Like, he's just an older kid who's willing to shoot things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whenever you were on the Skeleton Crew set, obviously there's a lot of stars, Jude Law's there and stuff. But how did you geek out when you looked at your crew and you realized that Urkel was there?
The alien has a sweet heavenly voice, like Urkel, and he appears every Friday night, like Urkel.
It was lovely. Jaleel sat either next to me or a chair over from me in the makeup trailer of a morning. So I'd get to see Jaleel come in. There was the flashes of Urkel, and then as appliances started going on, I'm like, nope, there's my pirate buddy. And just by sheer happenstance, they oftentimes would block us kind of close together. So I started talking to him a little bit. I was like, hey, can I like just, I don't know, punch you in the shoulder? And like, do you care? And he's like, oh, no, man, just do your thing. That'd be great. So he was down to play. And I think that I don't know how much of that, there were a few things that didn't make the edit that we had been doing, but they knew that we were doing that. So then towards the end, when Vane finally kind of takes more charge and throws him out of the way, I'd been doing that on occasion. I found opportunities to kind of just like throw things or people out of the way. So initially they had a switched where his character came as Gunter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he kind of moved me out of the way off of the panel. And I suggested to the director, because we had different directors each time, and I didn't know who knew what or how much of the previous episodes that they had seen. So I did present only a very few times, and this was one time. I did suggest, I was like, hey, I've kind of done that. I've started establishing that Vane's a bit pushy. So if we were to flip flop that would kind of maintain that, if you want to try to maintain that. And so they did. They gave me the opportunity to chuck Urkel out of my way.
The dream.
Living it now.
And just talking about people you work with, we talked to Brendan Wayne a few episodes ago, and he says that being on set with Carl Weathers was just such a pleasure. But obviously, you got to work with him as well. How was working with Carl?
We could spend the next hour and a half, and I wouldn't do it justice. Getting to be involved in Star Wars was an absolute dream, and working with Carl in that capacity, it was a gift beyond description. I knew that we were going to be sharing the scene. I was originally, as I said, scheduled for one day, and then I was out. Based on the experiences that I've had as an actor and also a guy stuffed into a monster suit, there is reasonably neither the time nor sometimes the egoic interest on the parts of other people to interact with the monster as if it were a piece of furniture. So sometimes you don't really connect, right? Like you may share a scene, but it's more like just perfunctory, like physical action. You're going to do this. I'm going to do this. Great. And then you never see the person again. From the moment I arrived on set, dressed up as Vane, almost literally from the moment I got a knock on the door asking if I would be willing to run lines with Mr. Weathers. So from that moment, every time there was a break, Carl wanted to find me and run the lines just to kind of cement the dialogue, one, but also work the scene and see if we could come up with something to help it become better. And that impression of Carl lasted the entire 2 days. We extended into a second day of his professionalism, his passion for this art form, and his desire to always improve in the most generous way possible. Not just working the lines on breaks in between setups, but during lunch, I just found myself sitting on a bench with Mr. Carl Weathers, having stories about early days in Hollywood and him coming from football and parties he went to and people he was introduced to. And he gave me some like fatherly advice. I don't know what age he thought I was under the makeup, but he's like, hey, kid, don't forget those fans, they come in all shapes and sizes and ages. And, he was talking about conventions, and lovely, lovely gentleman. And everything I hear about him from everyone else just seconds that thought that, he was one in a million.
And were you sitting in full makeup while he was wanting to do like line reads with you? Were you just sitting there like
He never saw me as me.
Never saw you the whole time?
I was always 100% dressed and made up on set. They had already finished their process. I'd been dressed. I'd, waited until the time to be called to set. So I was always introduced to Mr. Weathers as Marty / Vane. Yeah, it was never me. Never had the chance to say hi out of makeup.
Have you ever been, say, like a convention or even just bumped into somebody at an event and been like, oh, hey, how you doing? And they're like, who are you? Because maybe they've only ever seen you in makeup in a suit.
Strange things like that have happened. Yeah. In fact, on Evil, my introduction to Katja Herbers was as George for the scene when I'm crawling on top of her and like terrorizing her. So I'm literally like, hi, I'll be crawling on top of you. Hi, I'm Marty. Nice to meet you. Good, good, good. Okay, here we go. Yeah, it's funny. I think the longer, certainly for the first chunk of my career, but once I started getting a little more high profile jobs where there was dialogue involved, and then something after the fact, like conventions or interviews or whatnot, I think there's a little bit more association with this face, but not to the point where like people just come out and go, hey, you, except one time in Japan when I went to Celebration, I was literally walking out of the convention center down the street, and a couple of young Japanese kids came running up to me, and we did a little phone translation. They're like, you, and I'm like, me? Yeah. They actively sought me out because they had the connection made. But no, it's been I would say, not unintended, but much appreciated anonymity with this kind of strange niche in the acting world of being encased in silicone and foam latex and kind of tucked away, hidden away.
Yeah, I think people who do like creature performing and puppeteering and all that stuff, like it's incredible. Like I love it. I think as an art form, it's fantastic. But I kind of want to take it back to your early career and talk about another big sci-fi franchise that you've been in, Star Trek. You know, there's always kind of the Star Trek, Star Wars, which do you prefer? You know, but that's where you
Bring
kind
it all
of
on.
started out. So what was that like getting to work on Star Trek? Especially I suppose that the early Star Trek stuff is probably very different from this modern day Star Wars, but what was it like working on
Yeah.
Trek?
Another lovely experience. That one came about more from just early days, like background actor. After college, I wanted to go again. I said, very technically minded. I wanted to get onto a set, and I wasn't going to wait around and audition for years and see if I could get a bit part on 90210. I wanted to just be on a set and start learning who does what, where I should stand or not stand, like all that. And when I was doing background work, a large call for background actors who had long hair. Back at the time, I had my 20-year-old luscious locks, and they were looking for like space hippies, and it was for the Baku tribe on Insurrection. So that was my first in with them. And then Nemesis came up because I had worked so long on the other one, Insurrection. When Nemesis came out, they're like, "Hey, Marty, we know we can rely on you. Do you want to come in and help, the costume department build the Reman Warrior suits? We have a bigger stunt guy suit, and we need we're going to have a lot of like, thin guys. They're vampiric characters." So I was involved in that from pre-production. And I'm not sure if I'm veering away from your question, but like that was kind of my intro to it as the Reman Warriors. That was one of the first long-term makeup gigs that I did. And I was sitting in the chair of a makeup artist named Kenny Myers a bunch of days in a row. So I got to start getting to know Kenny a bit. One day, flipping through a magazine, I see a picture of Kenny in the magazine, and I didn't really know, who he was or like how this all worked. So he kind of kindly took me under his wing, and he and I got to work together on a couple of side projects and have become lifelong friends. He and his wife are some of my oldest, best friends in the business. But then once you get involved in that world, that's kind of how that niche developed and solidified is, between these large jobs, all these amazing artists, they just hop from shop to shop and job to job, and they keep track of who's good in makeup, certain body types and physicalities and abilities. And so there's a little handful of actors that, are seen as like reliable for them, right? If you have acting chops or you're not going to eat a lasagna at lunchtime and destroy their work, you typically will get called back from time to time when a job has the requirements they're looking for.
Yeah, we spoke with Kevin Mangold, who was the main Rodian on Skeleton Crew, and he sort of said similar, where you kind of get in with a creature house, and that sort of you get work then through, as you say, the physicality and how you can perform in different suits and your stature and everything else all kind of comes in there. But I suppose with you doing Van, it was the acting and what you could do with your face with that makeup on as well. I suppose you were able to bring a lot to that performance, which, as I say, to be one of the first Necto to be so expressive is great.
They left me a lot of eye area open since this was so built up. I knew I couldn't do much like with my lower face. They did split the brow so I could at least raise a little bit, but I had all this area. So I'm like, okay, well, he's going to live in wide shots with his body and the wardrobe, and then tight, it's going to be all about his eyes. So you'll see, like if you ever watch that first Mando thing, I'm like side-eyeing Carl just to beat the band. I was trying like, what can I do? But it's going to be a lot of like eyeball acting.
But to go from then that where you can eyeball act and be a bit more expressive to something that isn't quite as expressive, and probably because of how big a suit it is, the monstrosity from Smile, what was that like?
I think my primary job on that was repetitive motions in concert with the other puppeteers. Like that was the whole job. It's just getting in sync with someone was on the back legs. I think I might have had, it was either one or two people. I can't remember now, but, and then the other puppeteers who were running the Sosie Bacon's animatronic double that the mouth had an armature in. And so, yeah, it was more coordinating, doing a little dance with other people because there was no acting required.
Yeah, it was more puppeteering.
Move this way, time it,
Do you prefer doing more van style creature work, or do you like mixing up with the likes of the monstrosity work as well?
I really appreciate the challenge of kind of that dance among other people and like watching Baby Grogu. And I think there were 3 different people controlling him. I'm like kid in the candy store watching how that all comes together because they really have to lock in to create something cohesive that seems like an emotive being, right? But having trained as an actor, my deepest interest is in conveying emotion, generating real emotion and applying it to this unreal situation, following an arc, developing this character to have this experience like that. That's always been at the core of my interest in this. So with Vane, I think, he's a bit of a cartoon, but he's got enough personality to really interest me. And there were a couple times when I would kind of giggle because like, if you can get to the point where you don't have to think about the dialogue and you don't have to think about the environment and you can just like let this character go, sometimes I would be surprised. Like, God, I hope I didn't go too far. I didn't expect to do that. And then things happen and it feels good. It feels organic. And there's a lot of satisfaction in that, like creatively and professionally. So I personally prefer more standard or, character-based work as an actor, whether it's makeup or out of makeup.
I would like to see Vane come back in another kind of pirate Star Wars project, but I'd like to see him because I think his personality would work quite nicely with another big pirate personality in Star Wars, and that's Hondo Wanaka.
Hondo!
We would love to see a live action Hondo here out of Rim.
So would I.
Yeah. Would you love to work? Would you like Vane to bounce off? Would you bring Jim Cummings to be live action Hondo?
I think that would be. I'm surprised they haven't done it yet, and I hope they're in the process. It seems like this is all speculation. Obviously, I know nothing, but it seems like Ahsoka season 2 would be a prime opportunity, or another, whatever the next show is. They've got such a wealth of talent available that they haven't explored yet. Jim Cummings is amazing, and I loved the Hondo character. At first, I'm like, curious, interesting, I like him, and then they kept bringing him back. I'm like, okay, they loved him too. I think that he and Vane would be an interesting pairing because obviously Hondo has the knack for managing personalities, and he'll do what he needs to do, inclusive of some violence. But I think Vane is such a like wrecking ball. He has no subtlety. He can try to manipulate, but he's a bit obvious in it. And he's just explosive. Like I said, he's an uncorked teenager, emotional disregard for everything around him. So that could be kind of funny to see if
Hondo takes Vane under his wing and teaches him to become not just a better pirate, but a better person.
a growth potential for Vane. Can you imagine?
Yeah, through Hondo.
Let me pitch you on this, Marty. Vane goes to Mos Espa and becomes part of the moped gang from the Book of Boba Fett.
Hang on. I feel a little something's coming up. Oh, okay.
Is it pride and joy? Is that what was coming up?
Yeah. The moped gang. Those were some very bright and shiny mopeds on that dry, dusty desert planet, weren't they? I'd like to know what the HVAC system in their garage was.
I think Vane would look nice with his own little dirt brown moped.
Yeah, he would have to. It would be modified to suit him, and I don't think he would take very good care of it other than where it counts in the engine. Engine and controls, yes. Aesthetics, he's not going to be polishing his moped anytime soon.
No.
But I like it. I think he'd be very adept.
Speaking of being adept, see that segue, Danny? Working on Mando and Skeleton Crew, obviously there's sort of different directors for different episodes, and you obviously have like old hats like Rick, but then going on to Skeleton Crew, you had like John Watts, who brilliant director in his own right, but first time coming into the world of Star Wars, and obviously the Daniels, who I don't know if they'd won their Oscar at the time, but could you feel the difference from episode to episode working under different directors?
A bit, a bit. I think because it was known to me early on, and even before production, like Vane was being invited into this much, much larger world than Mandalorian. I thought my scene with Carl was very focused and two-person tennis. There was a reason for Vane to be there. It was a joy and a pleasure to be invited to Skeleton Crew, but I had a lot less heavy lifting. A couple of scenes here and there, but mostly he was just there, like part of the gang. And I think because of that, a lot of my interaction with the directors was also a bit held back because they had the kids to work with, they had Jude Law to work with, and they had this larger story to keep running down the tracks. So I didn't have a bigger sense. I didn't get to work with the Daniels. There was a little bit of a difference in working style that I could observe kind of from the periphery. I loved working with John on the first one. I think he did the first one or maybe two episodes to see how he kind of set the tone for this show that they created. I received a little bit of direction from John that was just perfect. It was just like a nudge that let me know, even in this larger tableau, he saw what I was doing. And he's like, yep. And then and I'm like, great, got it. Yeah, cool. Go back to directing your big show, Mr. Watt. It was lovely with Bryce. Fun to watch her work this massive scene when we were on the bridge of the ship dealing with tons of pirates and Jude and a sea shanty and speeches and a lot of moving parts. And it was delightful to see her kind of take charge of that situation too. She was a very, very generous director as well. There was one point in that interaction with Jude where it was the credit. He revealed the credit, and I think Vane's top of his head lifted off because the thing that motivates him the most was finally right there in front of him. And there was a little bit of interaction between Vane and Jod. And because of what we had shot this particular day, I saw a route where, again, like my technical brain was chewing on this. And I thought, like, if they do this, maybe that would help. Like, because I've also been an editor for 20 years, I'm thinking like, okay, so this plus this equals, we could go that way. And that would maybe help. So again, risky as an actor who's down here and not up here, but I was like, here's a suggestion. If you think it would be helpful, cool, great. If not, see you tomorrow. Got a response back. They're like, we'll send it up the line. And the next day, in the midst of this massive chaos with so many moving parts, Bryce Dallas Howard comes up to me and she said, hey, we got your email. Loved it. We're not actually going that direction. We're going to go this direction. But we could shoot that. I wanted to give her a hug. I'm like, you're willing to burn an entire take just to satisfy what you imagine to be my little actor's ego? Aw. No, I'm happy to be here. Happy to go down the tracks that you've laid. That's never happened to me before, where someone would want to take an extra 10 minutes out of a massive production day to just kind of accommodate an idea. But that's kind of how it seemed like she was running her episode or episodes, is that she was collaborative, but also because I think she comes from an acting background as well. The collaborative ideals were up. She wanted input. She wanted Jude to also contribute, obviously, as number one on the call sheet, and so much incredible experience that he has to just make the thing better, contribute ideas to the larger improvement.
And sort of, obviously, you're used to working behind makeup and stuff, working with, sorry, I don't know the name off the top of my head, but the young kid that plays Neil.
Robert.
Did you ever sort of work with him to sort of give him some advice about working under makeup or with puppetry?
Nope. Didn't have that kind of chat. It was always like peer level. Like, we're just going to be here messing with each other. I really only worked with him and Ravi at the cafe when those two are paired up and they're also trying to pay for their lunch with the credit. And that was also mostly just, hey guys, I'm going to be slapping your backs. Is that okay? Just checking in and going through the scene in the moment. But no, I think he had also, because that character had so many complex elements to it, and they were running different aspects, whether it was someone else in the full head or someone in an animatronic head, or he had like tracking data in the little camera when it was his performance capture. Yeah, he had already been well versed in kind of the needs of that particular character. there have been other times on other shows where I've been able to kind of step in and say, here's a way to make your life easier, and try this and try this. And yeah, it'd be an interesting aging character actor side gig to be a consultant for creature suit survival skills.
Did you ever want to go up to the head sculpt and just brush the fringe? Because I do.
Just move that.
Just give it a wee pat in the head. There you go, Neil.
They were all having such a good time. They were absolutely having a blast. It was one opportunity for them. And I would love to see this, season 2, now that time has passed and those kids are sprouting. It would be fun to see now what they could do with that time gap and see what those characters would be up to a few years in.
Yeah, I'd love a Skeleton Crew season 2, or even just a spin-off from it. I think that'd be great.
Now that Ryan is the new Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's very exciting.
Well, there's that aspect too. I mean, I don't know if that would sway Disney, but it probably would help. If her star is rising, that's just going to be more eyeballs on their show. So perhaps, I mean, I know the guys were talking about having ideas for what to do with the time jump, and they've got a plan should it ever come to pass.
Mm-hmm. With SM-33, was that like a puppet that you were sort of fighting with, or what was the reference for that? And then in turn, did you get to meet Nick Frost? Did Nick Frost ever appear on set, or was all his dialogue recorded separate?
Never saw Nick. I think he was just in post-production in the voice booth.
Mm-hmm.
On set, it was one of 3 things typically. One was a fully built, non-articulated, just a reference. One was the kind of puppeteered from the back, on rods, and the guy in the gray onesie kind of running the thing. And then it was this lovely gentleman named Zach, basketball player, who had the Lycra tracking dot suit. And I think most of that stuff during the fight scene, other than the face-to-face where I'm kind of like eyeballing SM, it was Zach for the physical component, because then they could actually block out the fight with him and then have something to animate over. Yeah, for the punch, I think initially there was like a visual reference with the puppeteered version, and then it was just Zach to work out the timing of like several components in a row to get to the punch, which was like, I got frustrated, I pulled the gun, I tried to shoot him, it ricocheted off and hit somebody else. I come back over to SM, and at that point he knocks it and punches, and then the fight kicks off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fantastic scene. Like, I already loved the idea of Smee before watching the show, because the name alone being a reference, and just his design is fantastic. And then as the show plays out and the wee thing living in his eye, I love droids in Star Wars. I think droids are one of the best things about Star Wars, but SM-33 in particular has become like one of my favorites. And again, another character that I really want to see more of in Star Wars.
I don't know whose idea it was, but my hat is off to them in that episode when what does he do? He's saying, he's like, he knows what's up with Jod, and he kind of goes, aye, and then he moves off almost completely off camera and then comes back in, aye, for a second one. God, I watched that 5 times in a row.
So good. It's the whole show as well. It just has it's got good comedy timing. It's got good like emotional beats. Yeah. I think Skeleton Crew for me is just one of those ones that I think a lot of people have slept on too. And I'm like, no, you got to go check it out. Like, it's just such a nice, cozy, as I say, kind of autumnal. Like, there's something about it that just makes me. I wouldn't be surprised. It's one of those shows that when I was first watching, I was like, I could see the Amblin, Elliot and E.T. flying over the moon beforehand as it started. It's just got that perfect feel about it. And yeah, I love it.
Well, I don't know how you two gents grew up or your ages, but I chucked my bicycle over plenty of fences when I was a little kid in my small town. If you have to go there and that's in your way, you grab your bike, you fling it, throw your hat over the wall, like it's going to happen. So that they incorporated that made my heart really happy. I knew they understood. Yeah, they're not just playing fan service. They have an understanding of what makes that stuff special and why those Spielberg films really hit you in the heart and how much it means. I felt that same feeling when I was watching Skeleton Crew.
Yeah. I think sort of with Stranger Things ending, Welcome to Derry being so popular with its young cast, I think it's prime time for Skeleton Crew to sort of come back to sort of ape off the sort of success, because it sort of came out on Disney Plus and it had been delayed for so long.
Yeah,
And then it just sort of came out around Christmas time, which was nice because it had that Christmassy feel. But I think it just got lost in the sort of push of Disney plus streaming that you could easily cut it to like a nice 2.5 hour film and release it like that.
sure. Yeah, yeah. I know that we were pushed almost an entire year, I think, because they did want to hit that holiday season. And we were originally set to go the previous holiday season, but I think I don't know this. I think either I read it or imagined it. Who knows? I'm prone to do that. But I think we were scheduled originally to come out ahead of the Acolyte. And boy, do I wish we had. I think that by the time the Acolyte hit and with the push and the delay, I think, yeah, I don't know what the numbers are, but taking the temperature of the fan comments on YouTubes and socials and whatnot, I think people were a little bit beat up and a little bit, their expectations were not high. And I don't think a lot of people even cared at that point or even knew of it, like kids show. I heard like kids and I heard suburbs. That's not Star Wars. Really? Is it not? Because it could be, because I think it is. It is. So maybe it is. Yeah, I think if the interest had been higher, I think there would have been a little more forgiveness and a lot higher viewership, which it deserves, still to this day. It's not gonna get worse with time, and it's always available. So I don't know what kind of a push to generate to get people to watch it again, but we recently had a little it's been 1 year anniversary get together with some of the other pirate characters, and we were again singing its praises and just hoping and hoping.
As I say, we hope for something more pirate based from Star Wars because it's intrigued us so much from the introduction of pirates in The Mandalorian to then what we got in Skeleton Crew. It'd be great to see more of the swashbuckling world of Star Wars. But if, say, Lucasfilm Disney call you back one day and they're like, listen, we're not doing anything with Van right now, but we would like you to come back and play in Star Wars some more. Is there any particular type of character or alien or just what would you like to do in Star Wars that isn't Van?
Moped gang leader.
You knew. Moped garage owner.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Guy who modifies and upgrades, but owns his own garage because then he'd have all the tools. Plus, he'd be on one location and probably wear comfortable clothing. We're getting into the more practical.
Is that the dream? Yeah.
Like, could I wear socks in this episode? Well, that's interesting. I think, yeah, because of the personal desires after 25 years of having glue applied to my face at the wee hours of the morning and then sitting in that adhered situation for the better part of 12 to 15 hours, I'm going to go with Imperial type.
Ooh.
Not necessarily specific, but type, kind of the more regimented, structured, stoic, by the books type character.
Mm-hmm.
Partagas. I loved Partagas in Andor. Like that type of world, ISB higher up, bring it on. Yeah.
That's what we're hoping for. You hear that, Lucasfilm? You hear that? Marty's keen.
Even within that type, I think we could and should maybe talk about Andor a little bit because you want to talk quality performance, quality production, great actors involved. Anton Lesser is always a joy to watch. I loved his Game of Thrones character. I loved him in Wolf Hall. Like he's delightful. And what he did with Partagas is kind of like the been there, done that ISB officer with all these youngsters kind of like swirling under him. Love that character. Someone like that would be a delight to play.
Had they called you for, well, obviously the answer is yes, but had you got that call for Andor, would you have straight in for it, especially the second season?
I would have
How good.
kissed my dog on the head, given everyone hugs, jumped on that plane and run for it. Yeah. There's a big difficulty that either I perceive or I've understood to be true in American actors coming this direction. We'll take anyone from the UK because they are born with thespian abilities and intelligence and training that we don't often have in the States. We have our type, but it doesn't seem to kind of hold up to the quality and ability of a lot of UK performers. So coming the other direction, I found it a little more difficult to kind of knock on the door or even find the door sometimes. And rarely does someone want to open the door because we have enough people here to satisfy, Yeah. So if that ever came up, that would feel a bit like a lottery win, a bit like a gift to be able to participate in a show of that caliber.
Luckily, Marty, we have an in. Recently on the show, we had Erskine from Andor, Piero.
Lovely.
We could drop a wee message. Hey, Piero, Marty wants to come and stay with you for 6 months.
What? Does he have a couch available?
Tony Gilroy has said recently that he would return to Star Wars just to live in London again. And it's like, Tony, you can just live in London. You have money.
Yeah. This is a manageable problem, Tony.
Yeah.
No, I thought that was pretty genius of him to hit up the theater scene and pluck from it as he did. I've chatted with Denise Goff a little bit at Power of the Force in Cologne. We were at the same time at the same place, so I was picking her brain a little bit. She was telling me about, yeah, Tony he'd be at the productions that were happening and go, she'd be great and he'd be great. I think Kyle has been in London for quite some time and was doing a show, and that's how he was selected. He didn't come from the States. He was already based, smart guy that he was already based in the UK. But that caliber of actor really, really was what that show wanted. And I'm such a fan of Andor. I mean, I could talk for days on that one, not just from the structure of it, but certainly the timeliness of the story ideas behind the rise of fascism in the world and what people on the ground level are faced with, the choices that they can or might not make. Really great, superb work. It's a gem, not just amongst the Star Wars canon, but I think just in television itself. I'd put it up there. I don't know where you guys stand, and I would like to hear, but I would say, in the pantheon of quality televised entertainment, Breaking Bad, Deadwood, Andor, The Wire,
Sopranos,
right up there. Sopranos, yeah, it's up there.
Yeah,
So
I would
good.
agree. Yeah, we gushed about Andor over like 2 whole episodes back when we first started, because again, we obviously, as you mentioned there, the links to what's currently going on in the world, but then also the kind of stuff that you can take from it regardless of where you are in the world. Like there was a lot we kind of saw that related to the troubles here in Northern Ireland, that you could kind of read into with the first season, and the funeral at the end, very much sort of like a Republican funeral here, and then to have an ISB agent fire into a crowd resonates very much here in Northern Ireland. So it was one of those things you're kind of watching and you're like, oh, this isn't family Star Wars fun anymore, but sometimes you need that. You need to have that variety from a franchise as big as Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, George did call it a galaxy. He didn't say a planet far, far away or a town far, far away. So I think it has all the leeway one might want to explore any ideas that resonate with us in our lives. And yeah, hats off to Tony and his brother and everyone else who developed that. It's a phenomenal piece of work.
Yeah, I think it's important that, like, people say it's more mature, but realistically, when A New Hope came out, it's not that long after the Second World War, and the idea of a regime coming together and, ruling over the galaxy in some audience members' heads was something they lived. Now, come 50 years later, we see Andor, we see these scenes on Gorman, and it's the same thing. It's like me and Danny have said, we lived through the troubles in Northern Ireland, so it's the same fear that those people would have had then that we can have now, where you can see the parallels, and obviously political stuff, not just in America, but around the world, where it just sort of, it's definitely hit at the right time, and it's definitely hit the right audience for people to sort of realize that, like, oh, Star Wars is a lot deeper than just the swords and the Chewbacca's.
Yeah. Well, it's cyclical, and it does hit us at a deeper level. And even look at how George put that together, as you alluded to. I think I believe he was exploring kind of the direct correlation between the Vietnam War and what was happening. The empire was like the government, and what it was doing in these kind of imperialistic empire building expansion and expansionistic tendencies that we all seem to fall into when resources get slim and egos get large, and it's nuts. But just the mythology of it as this kind of resonant storytelling structure that has worked for hundreds and hundreds of years, it'll never not work. It hits something kind of deeply human that we're never going to fall away from. And if it helps us avoid some of the pitfalls the next time around, because there'll always be a next time around, then great. I mean, art should help us advance. It's not just to sit there and be entertained by, it's to generate ideas and maybe evoke a change.
And I suppose kind of similar in that way, then you have the other project you worked on, Star Trek, helping us kind of understand and develop as beings, as a species, and our understanding of the world too. But the most important question of all, what's better, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Oh, well, clearly, um, I have room for both. I can hold two ideas at the same time. I like both. I mean, I don't think it wouldn't be a difficult argument to say that they can both exist very easily together. I like the kind of rough and tumble, little dirty around the edges Star Wars world that got cleaned up over time, but it was pretty greasy to begin with, and then kind of the slick and clean utopian ideals of Star Trek. Yeah, they're all exploring good ideas, and more sci-fi is better.
Yeah, whenever I was younger, I was very much like Star Wars is better, and was always Star Wars is better. And then J.J. Abrams kind of eased me into Star Trek as I matured, So now I can appreciate both.
Yeah, I think it was a similar trajectory. I think Star Wars hit the 7-year-old Marty liked Star Wars because that was where it was at. I didn't care about the television version of Star Trek because at the time there were other things. There were cartoons and what have you. But when the movie came out, it was all Star Wars all the time. And then, yeah, there was a later appreciation as I think my sensibilities deepened a little bit, where Star Trek came up and I'm like, yes, that's how we should be approaching things. But then it's a fun world to play with, Star Wars.
I think that's the perfect way to wrap up, unless you want to answer.
How dare you wrap up?
Marty, I got a bonus question for you. Would you rather share a car with Lumpy or Itchy from the holiday special?
I have to choose. What if it were a large car?
The whole family, the whole Chewbacca family.
Mine, or if I don't know. It depends on the hygiene.
I feel like Lumpy. I was going to say
me as me or me as Vane.
Ooh. I feel like Vane wouldn't pop with like Lumpy and Itchy's carry on for very long.
It's none of it.
It's a Harry and the Hendersons type situation where Vane goes back to his family, but Itchy has moved in
to his room and moved his stuff.
Yeah.
Don't touch Vane's stuff. Vane's an only child.
Yeah.
Don't mess with his toys.
But yes, thank you very much, Marty, for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in more stuff, more Star Wars, whether it be Vane or the grouchy Gary Joner on Mos Espa shaking your fist at those moped gang.
You kids!
I can envision it. I can see it.
Yeah. I finally reached an age where those are very appealing roles. You kids! Get off my lawn!
But thank you, sir. Thank you, Danny, as always, for being my beautiful co-host.
Thank you, Adam.
Marty, is there anything you'd like to plug?
There's nothing to plug other than get out there and be good humans. Be good humans. Enjoy the sci-fi, enjoy the entertainment, but work on being a good human. We need all the good human training and discernment we can get these days.
We need more Luke Skywalkers and less Darth Vaders.
Yep. Got plenty of the Darth Vader types right now.
Yeah, but you can find us on the usual wares on the Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, the same malarkey. But we'll see you next week for more fun and shenanigans in the world of Star Wars. But as always, we have friends everywhere. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.